This is February 12th, 2020. Well, I'm sorry, this is February 13th, 2025. This is the special Thursday edition of the regular board meeting for the School District of Waukesha, rescheduled from last night due to weather. So please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mrs. Kosch-Schmidt, would you please take the roll call?
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Eric Brooks.
Here.
Thomas Harland.
Here.
Betty Koenig.
Here.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
Diane Voigt.
Here.
David Wad.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
Kelly Piasek.
Here. And can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you. Because of our need to reschedule the meeting for weather reasons last night, we will not have our students here this evening. So Bright Lights and our high school student update will be rescheduled for March. And we will move right into the opportunity for citizens to speak. Did we have anyone sign up to speak tonight?
Not tonight.
Okay, thank you. So we will jump right into our minute approval. We have two sets of minutes for your consideration tonight from January 15th, one for the regular board meeting and one for the executive session. Mrs. Voigt.
I so move.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Koenig. Any discussion? All right, Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. And we'll start tonight with our WEF report. Mrs. Koenig.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. The Waukesha Education Foundation Board of Directors met on February 6, 2025. The WEF scholarships, our scholarship portal is now open and is closing on March 20th. Lynette went and met with all the high schools and spoke to interested seniors. WEF grants, our annual grant application opens on Monday, February 3rd, and will close on April 7th. Communication is available on the website via direct email to staff in the Explorer and on our social media. The grant amount for 2025 has not yet been announced. The WEF welcomes the opportunity to visit schools or a staff meeting in order to answer any questions we have, and we have appreciated the invitations that schools have given so far for the visit. Evening for Education. A reminder that the Evening for Education date is Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. We are almost sold out. At the time of this report submission, we have only 30 tickets left. Visit the Evening for Education page on our website. Visit the site directly at wefefe25.givesmart.com or text WEFEFE25 to 76278. Please help us promote this event. We have plenty of sponsorships still available, but signage deadlines are right around the corner. The 2024 WEF Awards. Congrats to our 2024 WEF Award winners. Our corporate partner is INEO Waukesha Engine, and our community partner is Blessings in a Backpack Waukesha. And Sally Jo McCalco Lifetime Excellence in Education Award is Sally Turner, SDW Environmental Ed. Golf, yes, we said it. Golf planning is underway, and we already have a handful of sponsors, 8 golfers, and have reached out to all of last year's sponsors to see if they'd like to renew. The website is live, and we'll share it out next month. Please mark your calendars for other 2025 events. Partners in Education reception is 6/17 of 25, and the annual golf outing is 8/7 of 2025. Any questions, please reach out to the WEF office at extension 1143 or email Lynette. Madam President, this concludes the WEF report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Koenig. All right, our first order of business tonight is the consent agenda. Mr. Clark, would you report Any gifts tonight?
Yeah, we have 4 gifts tonight. Butler Middle School received $1,000 from Gregory and Linda Burns to be used for purchase flexible seating options for movement to increase student focus in the classroom. Waukesha West received $1,000 from Jennifer Brown to cover expenses for the 2025 project graduation all-night party held for seniors at West High School. Waukesha North received $5,000 from John Aaron's, $2,000 for the Black Student Union, and $3,000 to go towards the football program. And lastly, the Waukesha North also received a signed Broadway poster of In the Summer House at the Lincoln Center, estimated value of $500 to $1,000 from Chuck and Linda Malone to be displayed in an office area.
Great, thank you very much. I need to read the rest of the consent. Did you have a comment about the gifts?
I just wanted to make a comment about.
Oh, okay.
Just one correction. Several of you were present at the 50th anniversary for North, and one of the intents of the gift that Chuck Malone gave, the signed Broadway sign, was for the kids to have it, like in the theater area, to be an inspiration, for one of their own to have made it to Broadway and to have been actually very, very successful in theater with 55 different TV shows on 9 networks, to her credit. So just a correction.
Thank you. All right, your agenda includes various categories for approval. If any board member wishes to have an item set aside for separate consideration, you will have that opportunity in a moment. There are no expulsions for your consideration. Policies and bylaws that are included in the consent agenda tonight include Policy 2131, Educational Outcome Goals and Expectations, Policy 5200, Attendance, Policy 5113, Open Enrollment Program Interdistrict, Policy 5341, Emergency Medical Authorization, rescinded, Policy 1100, District Organization. Mr. Zenobia has requested that Policy 5611 and Due Process Rights and Policy 5710, Student Complaints, both to be rescinded, be added back to the Student Services agenda for further discussion and possible action tonight. Mr. Wad has requested that Policy 9120, Public Information Program, be removed from the consent agenda and returned to the Policy and Government Relations Committee update for discussion and possible action tonight. If any board member wishes to have any other items set aside for separate consideration, please indicate so at this time. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Borowski, will you please present the consent agenda for approval? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So earlier this evening, the Human Resource and Compensation Committee approved 6 resignations, 8 retirements, 2 leaves of absence, and 51 new or modified contracts. The information was provided in your packet, and an addendum was placed on your desk. I move that the consent agenda be approved as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Any further discussion? Mrs. Voigt?
There was the addendum at our desk, and it looks like there were several new retirees added to the list compared to the first list that we saw. So is it 7 or 7 plus 5?
Yeah, there was, the initial one, are you talking about retirements?
Retirements.
Yeah, the initial one had 5 retirements and 2 resignations, and then the addendum had 3 retirements and 4 resignations. So added together should equal the numbers I gave you, which was the 6 resignations and 8 retirements.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you for the clarification.
Anything else? All right, Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. And we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Dr. Piasek. We can begin tonight with the overnight field trip report given by Deputy Superintendent Ketterman.
Good evening. We have several overnight field trips to update you on. So recently approved was the Saratoga STEM trip to Washington DC for the National Competition for Future Cities. For North, we have the varsity dance team going to a state competition, the academic decathlon, and then an Indigenous Health and Wellness Day that will be part of the health occupation class. Those are all for North. For South, we have mock trials going to Eau Claire and Madison, once for regionals, once for state. South and West, we have HOSA State Leadership Conference in Baraboo. West, we have a few more. Varsity dance team, state dance competition in lacrosse, West Choir, and then West Girls Track and Field. Combining all the high schools, we have a group for robotics, which is going to a competition in lacrosse. And those are all the field trips that have been recently approved.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Gunnerman. Today was an early release day for the students while the teaching staff had professional time, and then students will be off school tomorrow while staff participate in professional development via our Winter Institute. And then both students and teachers will have off on Monday, February 17th. So this is new in our calendar, having this February time, and I think we're going to find it to be very valuable as it's a nice breather between the winter break and the spring break for both kids and staff. And then I also want to thank our families as well for their flexibility when we have breaks in the school year like this one. I know that takes accommodation on their part and additional planning, and we're very grateful for that, as that time is very valuable for our staff. So that concludes my report, Dr. Piasek.
All right, thank you, Dr.
Thank
Seaborn.
you.
We will begin our committee reports and start tonight with the Human Resources and Compensation Committee. Mr. Browski, do you have anything additional for us tonight?
No, Mr. President, we had no discussion items and no action items, so that concludes my report.
Thank you. And moving then to Policy and Government Relations Committee to Mr. Wad.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek. The Policy and Government Relations Committee met on Monday, February 10th, 2025. First item is Policy 9120, Public Information Program. This was one of the items that was removed from the consent agenda, as Dr. Piasek noted during the consent agenda presentation. Policy 9120, Public Information Program, was removed from the consent agenda this evening in order for it to be discussed individually and for separate vote. The policy was revised to establish that the broadcasting and recording of board and committee meetings shall be a priority of the board. It further establishes the guidelines that shall be employed regarding live broadcasting in the event that the meeting is not accessible to the general public in person. It also establishes when recordings may be edited, who has the authority to approve the editing of recorded meetings to be posted publicly by the district, and that notifications be provided on meetings when they've been edited, and finally, that unedited versions of the meeting shall be maintained by the district. The committee voted to approve Policy 9120, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Harlan. Any questions or comments? Mr. Wad.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I pulled this out of the consent agenda, not because I think there's anything controversial about it, but I just wanted to bring it forward for the broader audience. This is one of those things where I feel like it's important for us to let the public know when we're making a policy that has a direct impact on their ability to interact or to view what's going on with the board. And I just wanted to make sure that it was out there. You may recall that a couple meetings ago, I don't know if it was last meeting or back in December, we eliminated the language around cable TV. So people may remember when there was a time when these board meetings were broadcast on public access within the Waukesha cable system. There was a point where the equipment stopped working, and I think there were a lot of people who had no idea that they could view the recording or view the meetings live or recordings of them on the website. So this is, first of all, to ensure that we establish that this is a priority, that our community has multiple opportunities to be able to watch the business that we conduct on their behalf, both in our committee meetings and in the board meeting as a whole. And hopefully, we'll have the technology and staff to be able to do other important items that the board may engage in, or the district may engage in the future when it's engaging with the public. I think about various times over the last few years where there have been public information sessions that have been held in a school or an auditorium somewhere. I think if we can find ways to prioritize making those available as well and making sure that they're available for people to review, especially when they're so important, that's something that we prioritize as well. The other thing I just wanted to point out, and those that are in the committee or that watched it before know I'm a little bit passionate about this. There have been in the past times when versions of the meetings have been posted, recordings, and material has been edited out. Important, newsworthy things, at least some may think. And there was never any idea who it was that made the decisions to edit it or to change the version that was posted. The example I use, and I think there are a lot of people who will watch this that may remember it, we had a meeting back in, I believe it was 2021, when a decision was made to change our policy around masks. Those that were in the boardroom that evening will remember that we had quite a powerful moment when there were a number of people in the gallery, I would guess probably 95%, who refused to remove their masks. And the board president at the time refused to start the meeting and until people put those masks on. That logjam was broken, but those that were there know it was a silent showdown. A very important moment for those that felt very passionately about that issue, probably on both sides. The next day, the recording went up. That portion was there for maybe an hour, and then all of a sudden a new version went up, and all of that had been removed. And those that weren't there didn't get the opportunity to witness what was a very powerful moment. Those that were in the room that night, and I was one of them as a member of the gallery, remember it vividly. So I want to make sure that, and that was one of the reasons that I brought this forward, that we will always be transparent about the recordings that we put out. If they are edited, if they are not the version from the beginning of the broadcast, or when we begin recording at the start of a meeting to the moment that we adjourn in open session, if there is any of that that is removed for any reason, that there is a process for approving those, that we note in the recordings that they have been edited, and that we keep the originals in the event that the material that was removed can be shared publicly through an open records request. So I just thought it was important to call all that out and make sure the public is aware that we're committed to that transparency and that we are committed to continuing to make these broadcasts and recordings a priority for our community, because I think they do increase the engagement of our citizens.
So before we do the roll call, I just want to clarify for the record that no one in this room was convening over that meeting at that time.
Yes, thank you. It was your predecessor, Dr. Piasek, that was presiding over that meeting. I believe that you were the one that made the motion, as I recall, to actually change that policy.
Thank you. So I think in the spirit of transparency, the intent is to provide the information that someone would have if they were in the room. I do recall that occasionally, at least in the past when I was viewing as a community member, there were technical glitches. And so our obligation is to have the meeting accessible and open to the public. In this day and age, there's an expectation that the live streaming is working. Occasionally, it does not. When we're notified about that, we make the best effort that we can to try to get it back up and to fix that. But I know there was a similar situation in 2021 when I was new to the board, where the presiding officer had actually asked to stop the recording because of an incident that was happening in the room, and so the tape didn't exist. But there will be situations like that, and I think we're going to make every effort that we can to ensure that there's visibility to what's happening in our regular meetings to those in the public.
Yeah, if I could just kind of respond to a couple of those things. So yes, we did call out in the policy that we will broadcast whenever technically practicable. And there are times when there are technical difficulties that prevent us from either live streaming it or recording it. So long as the meeting is open to the public, then we will not stop a meeting or pause a meeting to wait for the technology to be resolved. However, we did include language in the policy that says if for whatever reason the meeting is not open to the public, and only times I've been aware of that being the case were during the COVID era, when the buildings were closed to the public, that we would not hold a meeting until the technology was available to live stream it and record it. So we did take that into consideration as well. And yes, the intent here is to provide people in the general public the opportunity to see what anyone who was sitting in the room saw that day. And at the end of the day, the people that will be in a position to make decisions about editing, and I believe that we identified the presiding officer, superintendent, and if the presiding officer was also the board president, superintendent, presiding officer of the meeting. In the event that it's the board meeting itself, then I believe we said an officer of the board would be the third person to make the decision on whether it gets edited. My presumption would be that it would be edited in those situations where there may be information that is made public in the meeting that should be protected. So if there's student names that are revealed or private information, that sort of thing. Otherwise, or if there's just, I think about last spring, I think there was a tornado warning, and the meeting was suspended and everyone had to go downstairs until it passed, and then the board came back and adjourned, or the committee adjourned immediately after that. I don't think we want an hour and a half of just dead air while everyone is taking shelter in the basement on there. Those things I think are easily explained in the notes, but otherwise, yes, you're correct, Dr. Piasek. The intent here is to make sure that anyone that is not able to attend in person would be able to see anything that someone sitting in the room did.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, it was moved and seconded, so Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
Anthony Zenobia,
Aye.
Eric Brooks,
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski. Aye. Thomas Harland,
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Diane Voigt,
Aye.
Betty Koenig,
Aye.
David Wad,
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Back to you, Mr. Watt.
Thank you. Next, policy 1100, district organization, was approved on the consent agenda tonight and was revised to provide clarification and to move optional language regarding consultants to a new policy, 8125, titled Consultants. Any questions on that? Which will then lead us into policy 8125, Consultants. It's an action item on the agenda this evening. The language regarding consultants has been moved from policy 1100 as noted, district organization, to policy 8125 to provide clear direction from the board to administration regarding the scope of authority and process to engage a variety of educational consultants that provide services to support the school's programming. The committee voted to approve policy 8125, and I so move.
I second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Voigt. Any questions? All right, Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
Thomas Harland,
Aye.
Diane Voigt,
Aye.
Betty Koenig,
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia,
Aye.
David Wad,
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski,
Aye.
Mark Borowski,
Aye.
Eric Brooks,
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0.
All right. There were 4 information items on the agenda. 3 of the 4 were technical corrections. The first technical corrections were made to policies 1619.03, 3419.03, and 4419.03, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, to make grammatical improvements. The second set of technical corrections were made to policies 2271 Early College Credit Program to reflect current terminology and to streamline language. The final version of the policy is at your desk and maintains the current University of Wisconsin systems, institutions, and technical colleges language that was originally proposed to be modified. Finally, for technical corrections, there were some made to policy 2460, programs for students with disabilities, to reflect current verbiage and to reflect pertinent resources that are adopted to incorporate the DPI special education policies. Any questions on any of the technical changes? All right, next, state budget update. Mr. Brooks shared that Senator Bradley and Representative Allen released a bill that would address transparency and fairness in school referendums. The bill would protect school districts from losing state funding when other districts go to referendum, which is a topic our committee was able to discuss directly with Senator Bradley when he attended the November 11th, 2024 Policy Committee, as well as during our summer visits with legislators. Governor Evers will make his budget address to the state on February 18th, 2025, and we will discuss how it relates to education in the next Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting, which is scheduled to be held on Monday, March 10th, 2025 at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom of the Blair Administration Building. Unless there are any questions or concerns, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Wad. We will move on to the Finance and Facilities Committee presented by Mrs. Kozlowski.
The Finance and Facilities Committee met on Monday, February 10th. There were no action items on the agenda, and there were 3 discussion items. The first discussion item is 3121 FICA Alternative Plan. The committee discussed the current alternative to Social Security benefit that is offered to district part-time, seasonal, and temporary positions. The discussion included a review of some of the administrative challenges the program generates and whether or not the 3121 plan was the best benefit for district staff. The administration will likely be bringing back a recommendation for the committee and the board to consider, which will have the district moving away from the 3121 plan effective with the start of the 2025-2026 fiscal year and returning all district employees to the standard FICA or Social Security benefit. Okay, the second discussion item was the 2025-2026 student fees. The administration presented a draft student fee schedule for the 2025-2026 school year. The committee discussed the current parking fee and asked for additional information to be discussed at next month's meeting. And the last discussion item was the monthly budget report. The committee was presented with an update on the fiscal activity of the school district through January 31st. It was reported that the January property tax payments have all been received from the municipalities. Revenue and expenditures are within budget limits for both the general and the special education fund. The district is also operating within our approved budget and all other funds. The next F&F meeting is scheduled for Monday, March 10th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the boardroom. Dr. Piasek, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Next up is the Teaching and Learning Committee, which will be presented by Mrs. Koenig.
Thank you, Madam President. The Teaching and Learning Committee met last week, Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. There was 1 action item and 3 discussion information items that appear on the agenda for teaching and learning this evening. Our first action item is the approval of the AP Psychology resource. The high school social studies department went through a major curriculum review process in the 2022-2023 school year. However, AP Psychology was not part of that process at that time. The last revision of AP Psychology occurred in 2006, and the current curricular resource was published in 2018. Last year, the College Board made significant changes to the AP Psychology course and exam. The teaching and learning team first presented information on this topic in December as part of the curricular resource renewal process. The AP Psych teachers in each high school came together as a district team to explore both what this text offers their AP students and how the team can use it to provide students with a common experience in the year-long AP Psychology course and also the semester-only psychology elective course. This team recommended that the updated version of the AP text be considered for future use for both levels of psychology. On a vote of 4-0, the Teaching and Learning Committee approved the recommended resource for an 8-year period that would encompass both the semester psychology course and the AP psychology course as presented. We request board approval, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Zenobia. Any questions or discussion? All right, Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
David Wad,
Aye.
Thomas Harland,
Aye.
Diane Voigt,
Aye.
Mark Borowski,
Aye.
Betty Koenig,
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia,
Aye.
Eric Brooks,
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski,
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0.
Okay. Our first discussion and information item tonight is regarding Board Policy 5505, Academic Honesty. This policy is being revised to incorporate guidance on artificial intelligence, or AI, technology and its impact on academic honesty. The Teaching and Learning team, along with Mr. Schloman, Chief Information Officer, brought forward the policy and additional information regarding the recommended approach with AI. After an initial discussion of the policy at last week's committee meeting, the administrative team will make revisions to the policy and bring it back for a future meeting for discussion and possible approval. Okay. Our second discussion or information item tonight is high school schedule update. This report updated the board on the transition of the former high school schedule to the A-B block schedule for the 2024-25 school year. The A-B block schedule is 4 90-minute blocks per day, alternating on days A and B, for a total of 8 classes each semester. This ensures compliance with Wisconsin DPI instructional minutes. With this format, students continue to participate in semester and year-long classes. After one semester in the new schedule, student, parent, and teacher perception data and feedback was shared as part of the report. Overall, stakeholders are pleased with the changes. Our final discussion item is the summer school course catalog. From the historical perspective, the School District of Waukesha has provided a successful summer school program designed to engage students with continued learning for many years. Last December, the summer school dates and locations were approved by the board and communicated to the families. Last week, at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, the planned 2025 summer school catalog was shared. The team highlighted the enrollment windows for each level, the process for families to sign up for transportation, and a general overview of the multiple course offerings. Madam President, that concludes the Teaching and Learning Committee report. Our next meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 4th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the boardroom here at the Blair Administration Building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Koenig. So fun to think about summer school when we're staring down 5 inches of snow outside. All right, moving on to the Student Services Committee. Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek. The Student Services Committee met on February 4th here in the boardroom. We had 5 action discussion items. 3 of those were in the consent agenda this evening, and 2 of those were pulled from the consent agenda. The first being Policy 5611, which was due process rights. The reason this policy was recommended to be rescinded and was done so on a vote of 4 to 1 by the committee, because its contents were being replaced and were now applicable to Policy 5610, which is suspension and expulsion. The rationale was that rescinding this policy did not diminish students' rights, but rather eliminated the potential for 2 separate policies to become inconsistent over time, and as a result, impair students' and school officials' efforts to apply student parental rights associated with disciplinary actions. In addition to that, the policy is also currently in our student handbook. So it would be my recommendation to bring this policy back to committee next month and not move it forward at this time. So I would not be looking to make a motion.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, the issue that you raised, that being in the student handbook, is that we don't have a direct change to the student handbook that's planned. So if a student goes into the handbook, they're going to see reference to that policy.
Correct.
And if the policy is rescinded.
Correct. My understanding was that the student policy would be changed at some point if the board were to take action on rescinding the policy this evening. The student handbook would have to be updated. But in the interim, however much time that would take, also the student handbook's already in circulation, so is that fair to students to have to catch up to try to find out where this information is?
Mr. Watt?
Yeah, I think Mr. Nzombia may have answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway just to make sure. What is the primary delivery method of the student handbook to our students? Is it in hard copy? Is it an electronic version online?
It is the electronic version online is the primary delivery method.
So when I hear that it's been distributed in the sense that our current version is posted online. But there isn't like a hard copy that's given to students on the first day of school or anything like that?
Correct, just online.
Yeah, so the question I would pose is, if the delivery method is simply online, I'm just wondering why we couldn't just update the handbook as it exists now after the passage of this to reflect the policy number that the language has been moved to.
Well, you need to get your question answered, but I have a follow-up to that.
Sure.
Because I'm just curious how often we change the student handbook in the middle of the school year. Back to you.
That's a great question. I don't have the exact answer to, but it is possible to make the change because it's digitally easy to do. Anyone that printed a copy out and had it, it would then be obsolete. That is something that would have to be weighed, but it can be done.
It sounds like the issue at hand is the hyperlink to the policy that's in the digital version. So if somebody printed it, they can't hyperlink to it, but they would have the policy number, and that policy would be obsolete
Correct.
or rescinded.
Yes.
Mrs. Voigt?
I definitely would like to continue discussion about the removal of this policy. I think one of the key things here is that this is a good student reference for what the procedures are, the due process rights that they have. I was involved back in the one of the recent adoptions of it, and I appreciate, especially as a former teacher of administrative law, and I always use the school board and how we share policies as our law that students have to live with. I really appreciate the fact that this particular document, the due process rights, spelled out what rights the student had, and we talked about in the very first statement of it, the Board of Education recognized the importance of safeguarding a student's constitutional rights, particularly when subject to the district's disciplinary procedures. This speaks to suspension as well as expulsion. And I think it's nice to have in one spot that information included and being referenced. It states that this information should be included in the student handbooks in a manner that will facilitate understanding by students and their parents. You know, I think it's telling us to have to put it in the handbook. If we delete this, there's really no place in our policies that say we need to have a handbook even to notify the students of what their rights are.
Is there any other comments about this? So typically when action's taken and there's a recommendation coming from committee, it is still an available action. So if anyone on behalf of the committee would wish to move it forward, you'd have that option. So I don't want to prevent anybody from doing so. Given the committee chair is recommending there may be some interest in reconsideration, we don't have to take action on it tonight. Does anyone wish to move the policy forward for action tonight? Okay, so we will remand it back to committee.
All right.
Thank you. Next.
All right, the other policy that was pulled from the consent agenda this evening that was a discussion and action item was policy 5710, based on student complaints. This policy was also rescinded by a vote of 4-1 to avoid confusion regarding sources of student opportunities to raise concern or complaints through appropriate channels. The concept of student participation in improving the educational environment is important. The policy identifies those sources, but inadvertently creates the impression of a separate complaint procedure created by this policy. Policy 9130, public requests, suggestions, or complaints, is a comprehensive policy for addressing any issues not addressed by another specific policy, such as non-discrimination or harassment, among others. On a committee vote of 4-1, this had passed in committee, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Mrs. Voigt.
This is another item I would appreciate if we would return to the committee for consideration. In this particular case, when this policy was drafted back in 2019, the intent was to make this an educational tool for kids. It's kind of in one spot. If you've got a complaint, and, you know, we spell out the fact that we recognize that as citizens, students have the right to the following kind of complaint procedures. And it spells out, if you have a complaint related to bullying, this is where you go. If you have a complaint related to ADA, you know, kinds of situations, this is where you'd go. If you have a complaint about access to equal opportunity, this is where you'd go. If you have a harassment problem, this is where you'd go. And then the last one is the one that we're tying into, policy 9130. It's really just one element of the big picture. And that's referenced here, and that's the one that is really taking an approach that all citizens, parents, community members, et cetera, have these kind of complaint procedures. But I think it's unique for students to realize that you fit into that category too. You know, but there are other complaints that you might have, and these are where you reference the policies that give you what the procedure should be. It's really more comprehensive than just the reference to 9130, which they felt was a duplication type of situation. And like I said, it was written back in 2019 to reflect give a student like a one place to see, I've got a complaint, how do I handle it? And I think just this last week, many of us received a complaint from a student. And it's nice to be able to say back when you get a complaint like that to the school board, it's like, you'd be better off taking a look at policy 5710 and realize that you should start, as this says, you know, with your principal.
Mr. Watt.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. The process for filing a student complaint is detailed in full in the student handbook, is that correct? Or points them to where they can find the process for a student complaint? Is that true?
It doesn't reference the policy specifically, but it references the things that are in the policy as going to principal or an individual to start with. So
Right.
it gives a starting place in the handbook where students would go.
So I'm trying to put myself in the position of a student, and I would maybe, you know, say this applies to the previous policy we were just discussing. If I'm a student and I have some sort of issue I'm dealing with, whether it's disciplinary or I want to file a complaint or something, I would think the first place I would look would be in the student handbook. It wouldn't occur to me to go look at board bylaws or board policies. Now, there may be a point where the parent may want to look at the policies to see if they're consistent with what the district is doing. But if I'm a student, I guess what I'm getting at here is my primary concern is the handbook correct? And I'm not sure that I'm hearing that that's a problem in this case. In the previous one, we said, well, we need to make sure the reference to the correct policy is there and when is the appropriate time to do it. I'm not sure how that fits, though, in this particular situation. So unless someone on the committee feels strongly that this needs to go back, I would be in favor of moving it forward unless there's something I'm missing, which certainly is possible.
Mrs. Voigt?
The other component of policy 5710 that I think is especially well-crafted is the idea that all the legal references are there. Yes, the students do have these complaint procedures, and it's because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all these different kinds of things in the statutes. And again, the whole concept of administrative law is to, okay, how are we interpreting this as a school board as far as our students' rights, when they have a complaint and how it should be handled. And I think that this particular policy gives us that kind of a train of, this is the law that says you have this right, this is the law that says you have this right, especially when so many of the things are related to statutes, everything from Title IX to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. There's a lot of different places, and the procedures then have been evolved from those particular legal expectations.
Mr.
What?
Zenobia?
I didn't mean to cut anyone off. I don't know if there was a response.
Mr. Pat?
I apologize. I was incorrect. The policy 9130 is referenced in our student handbook.
is.
So, and to both points that were just made by Mr. Watt and Ms. Voigt, we did have a lot of discussion. A lot of the similar points were raised in committee in regards to policy 5710 being transferred within the body of policy 9130. And the concerns everyone had was all that being captured? The committee felt that it was. I would say that if there is an issue, and this was raised in committee, if there's an issue with student complaints being rescinded, there certainly is an opportunity to change that within policy 9130. All of this was done and recommended, by Neola to make our policies more efficient and not have duplicate policies. So I think if the committee next time has concerns, if the board has concerns, they certainly can be addressed within policy 9130, which I would highly recommend, to make sure that we capture anything that we feel was missed in rescinding policy 5710. And I've already made a point to talk to Mr. Pat about bringing back this policy next month as well, 9130. So I feel we're safe to rescind 5710, and if further discussion is needed, then next month would be the time to do that. So.
Does anyone else have a comment before we go back to Mrs. Voigt? Okay.
Is there a reason to rush doing the rescinding? We could actually look at 9130 again and see if everything that's in 5710 is there. Is there a reason that we need to do it tonight rather than waiting another month and actually looking at the whole policy, the whole package completely to see if everything is indeed, I don't understand why having two policies is that hard to keep up to date, when they're both referring to, and especially when there's all these different legal references. This is definitely something that would take, a lot to make sure that those rights are kept and identified according to what law is expecting. And I hate to see throwing away a really well-drafted policy without really giving consideration for, is it necessary to get rid of it? And I don't think that it is necessary to get rid of. The reason for rescinding is, I think, offset by the value of having this all as like a one spot to understand how to handle, complaints in kind of student-friendly terms, not a 3-page document, but kind of like just, this is your point, this is your point, and then this is where you go look for more information.
So I'm going to share my perspective on this. I don't know that there's anything necessarily time-sensitive about approving this tonight. Just as a reminder, these are the things that are brought to us as recommendations from Neola because there's been a determination of redundancy. So for this particular policy, I went and looked at where all the references were to the policies that were embedded in it in the student handbook, and I find quite extensive discussion in the student handbook about the bullying and non-discrimination and all those other pieces. So to the extent that the policy itself is not very useful, it just says this is where you can go look to find the policies about the policies that might be of interest to you. In this particular case, I find what's in the handbook to be far more useful to the student and quite extensive. And I don't know per se that the 8 or 9 footnotes that are in the policy that's recommended to be rescinded, by not having all of those footnotes in the same place, that's in any way taking away the rights that are guaranteed under those particular documents, just by nature of not being footnoted. But I can confirm that they are referenced in all of the policies that are extensively referenced in the student handbook. So I feel very comfortable that that policy itself, which is really just directing the students to other policies that are also referenced in the student handbook, is in fact quite redundant and doesn't really serve a purpose other than to just list out all of the other policies that they could look at, which I feel is already done in the student handbook. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable about it. I don't also believe that, to Mrs. Voigt's point, I don't think it's necessarily time sensitive, but I can't come up with a good reason not to do it tonight. If it were specifically called out in the student handbook, which in this case it's not, I would want to make sure that we had a plan for updating the handbook or any student-facing materials, but I can't find any reference to this particular policy anyplace else. That's why I support rescinding it. Any other discussion? Mr. Watt, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to restate it. To me, the most important component for this is, does the student have someplace to go where they will learn what the process is and what they're supposed to do? I can't think of any time in my professional career when I've had a question about, as an employee, if I had a concern or something that I wanted to address, that I didn't go to my employee handbook. I'm having a hard time believing that if the material is in the student handbook, that our board policies need to serve as the primary source for all of the, various policies and, legislative references and so forth. I tend to agree. I don't see any reason not to. If everything is there, it's in the student handbook, that's the place where I would expect students to go and their families, quite frankly, if they're going to be engaged on it as well. So,
Mrs. Kozlowski? All right. Any further discussion? All right, Stacy, would you take the roll call, please?
Diane Voigt,
No.
Betty Koenig,
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski,
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
David Wad,
I,
Thomas Harland,
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia,
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 8-1. Mr. Zenobia?
All right, so we did have one discussion information item last week, and that was on the Care Solace partnership that we have. Mark Lederer, our Director of Student Services, and Mary Green, our South High School social worker, presented information about Care Solace partnership, which is a mental health care coordination service provided free of cost to students, staff, and families, courtesy of the School District of Waukesha. They facilitate matching individuals to suited providers, making calls to confirm wait times and transitioning to care appointments, and following up to ensure satisfaction. The overall feedback from staff and families has been positive. Care Solace has estimated that 154.5 district staff hours were saved this school year because of their services.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thanks. I'm pretty proud of the service that this district offers. There's so many things that we hear about with the growing mental health needs of our students in the community, and at what point does this become another layered on effect for our staff and our teachers. And the reality is that education is not healthcare. But to have this as a liaison between our students, our parents, our school social workers, and our community partners is extremely powerful. And I think if there was anything that I could keep announcing is how do we market and make sure our community is aware of this? Because there's so many in our community that are talking about their child or the group's mental health needs. And right here, we offer a service to our entire community on behalf of recognizing and addressing the mental health needs. That is, it's free for them to reach out. They partner with you, they connect, they do all of these things. And it gives our psychologists and our counselors and our social workers the time to navigate all of the other responsibilities that they are required to ensure the well-being of every one of our students. This is an amazing service, and I couldn't be more pleased that our district offers this. It's a huge benefit to our community.
Thank you.
All right, that completes my report for this evening. The Student Services Committee will meet Tuesday, March 4th at 6 PM here in the boardroom.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our planned open business for tonight. Are there any recommendations for future board or committee action or discussion items? Mrs. Voigt?
I was wondering if we would be able to hear the follow-up on the personalized learning in the middle schools programs. I know we were looking at the elective options and variations on the way the Quest program and Flight program were going to be implemented, going forward. And we talked about getting feedback along the way, and I was just wondering if that'd be something we could put on the agenda for teaching and learning.
I think we can. I know we've got some really busy agendas coming up, but we definitely can schedule that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a need to adjourn to executive session this evening, so I'd be looking for someone to assist in reading items B and C. Mr. Borowski.
All right, thank you, Mrs. President. I move to adjourn the executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, the sale of district property, and adjourn to executive session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, superintendent mid-year evaluation.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Koenig. Mrs. Kosch-Schmidt, would you take the roll call, please?
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. That adjourns our meeting for tonight. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, March 12th, here in the boardroom at 6:30 PM. Thank you.